Right, you're now live on YouTube, Chair.
Thank you very much. So welcome all to Strategy and Performance Scrutiny Board meeting on the 8th of December. Let's get started with the substitutes. Are we any nominated substitutes, please?
With no substitutes, Chair, and no apologies.
Thank you. I note we have a replacement member, Councillor George Robinson, has now joined us on the scrutiny board. Hello, George. Thank you for joining us. Good to have you on board.
Thank you, Chair.
You're very welcome. Members' interests, to remind members of the need to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or other interests they might have in relation to items on the agenda. Are there any to bear at the moment? Can't see any. No. If there are any come up, please do so at the time. As far as public is concerned, it's not recommended that the public's excluded from this meeting for the consideration of the items of business on this agenda. I'd just like to say to all members this evening that we have a very full agenda, and in order to give each item due attention whilst not overrunning, I'd respectfully ask members to be succinct in their comments and questions, please, so that we don't overrun and we can give due time to the items involved. I'd also remind members that we have made an alteration to the running order. Now, it's changed a couple of times in the last 20 minutes. So, Lauren, could you just confirm how we're running on this one, please?
Yeah, of course, Chair. So I think we're taking all the items in order, but we're going to move the scrutiny review ahead of the people, assets and systems item. Okay.
Move scrutiny review ahead of
the people, assets and systems.
One. Yes, yeah.
That's
okay, that's good. So do those presenting the people and assets one know that that's going to happen? Good. So they're not going to be upset or disappointed. Good. Okay. So let's move on then to item 4, which is the minutes of the meeting on the 3rd of November. Does anybody have any comments, questions in relation to their accuracy, their content? Can't see anybody raising an issue there. So can we accept those as a true measure of what went on at that meeting? All those in favour of that, please? Just please, quick show. Thank you very much. Good. So we'll pass those minutes. So the first, what you might call the substantive item then on the agenda is the Cabinet priorities, the 6-month report. What I'd like to again to remind members of on this occasion is that scrutiny panels are all dealing with the aspects of this report which pertain to the individual scrutiny remits. And as far as strategy and performance is concerned, these are, I'll just read them out for reference: digital democracy, the BAME review plan, future council programme, make the books balance, become a more responsive council, and skills and talent management. So I'd like to focus comments and questions, please, on those particular items so that we can feed back those to Cabinet and members. So could I ask, is Tim going to do an initial introduction on this one, please? Councillor Swift.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I won't repeat what I said at the last one. So the report you have here is the report which went to Cabinet on Monday, which sums up progress. So just to quickly remind people that the 6-month priorities were structured into 4 areas, 3 of which represent the 3 priorities and one which is summed up under as well-run council. There was a total of 24 priority areas identified across those 4 areas. And then in the original report in June, 88 individual objectives or actions, which are examples of how we deliver on those priority. The report, which went to Cabinet, sums up the progress against those 24 priorities, and does that by reporting progress on many, but not all, of those 88 individual items. So you'll see that's quite a substantial piece of work that's gone behind this from all directorates in summing up where there is so far. So there are a number of other items on which progress has also been made, but they've simply been edited out of the final report. So, for example, starting work on the next phase of the A629 was one of the tasks which was mentioned in the 6-monthly report and isn't mentioned in this one. So if there is anything people picked up that hasn't been covered there, we can certainly get further information on it. But rather than go through them all in some detail, which we did at Cabinet and to some extent at the last meeting here, I'll pause, perhaps just check if there's anything specific Robin wants to highlight about the ones relevant to strategy, and particularly relevant to strategy and performance, and then we'll deal with any queries.
I think not much to add to what we said last time, Leader. I think that we recognise that there's been significant progress in a number of areas, but there is a number of challenges in delivering the all of the plan. I think, as I said last time, two of the biggest of those is the ongoing response to the pandemic, of which we will continue to need to deal with in weeks to come. And you'll know that there's a press conference going on now about the latest implications of that, and also the workforce challenge. And I think when we spoke last time, I did demonstrate or go through a lot of the positive progress we've made on a lot of the actions in terms of investment, of things that have been approved by Cabinet, services that have begun going, deployment of funding to those communities that most needed it through the pandemic. But there is a challenge around workforce capacity, and particularly in certain parts of the authority, like social care and legal and planning. But I'm happy to take questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Robin. I believe that you have to leave promptly this evening. I don't want to miss you out making contributions to particular things.
Chair, I think given the pressure on the agenda, hopefully that shouldn't be a problem for you, in that I think I need to leave by 6:30, unfortunately, for an emergency national meeting. But I think that the timing that we have for this item is within that parameter. So hopefully you'll be able to have the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's throw it open. So unless, does Councillor Dacre wish to come in on any of this at this point? I've got a note that you may be speaking. Thank you. So open to board members for questions. I've not seen any hands so far.
Councillor Robinson and Councillor Metcalfe, please, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Robinson, mention first. Go first, please.
Oh yeah, thank you, Chair. And it's absolutely marvellous to be on this panel under your chairmanship.
Don't overdo it.
I've got two really quick questions. I'll say them in this submission. First one's for Councillor Swift. Thank you, Councillor Swift, for this. By the way, I've just noted that waste and recycling isn't mentioned once within as a priority. I was just wondering for your take on that. I'm of the opinion that the council should have a strategy around that, specifically around HGV drivers. So I was just wondering the extent to which in future strategies that would be incorporated in. Second one is for Robin. I'd really like to see some work as a priority around technology in the council's technology provision. I'm specifically interested in technology essentially making officers more efficient, connecting up the processes, building in technology as part of the customer service experience. For example, AI chats, etc. I could go on and on. I was just wondering Robin's view on technology within the council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Tim, do you want to come on the waste one first?
Yeah, briefly. I mean that's a good example of the fact that whatever whatever you do in terms of putting forward a set of priorities 6 months ago, conditions changed, and we recognised when we did those that the pandemic and other things were creating a lot of new pressures. So at the point when these priorities were drawn forward, we couldn't have predicted particularly what has since developed in terms of the challenge to the waste service, particularly around HGV drivers. But I can assure Councillor Robinson that there is quite a lot being done on that. Some of that's been briefed to all members in the by Andrew Pitts and others, particularly in terms of work on training alternative HGV drivers, and also negotiations that are going on with Suez over paying conditions for drivers to make sure that that recruitment and retention is less of a problem in the future. I think that actually, I'm right in saying that I think the Place Scrutiny panel is having a more detailed look at waste and recycling tomorrow, and that might particularly look at some of the early options in terms of the new contract, because although the end of the contract 2 years away may seem like a long time, you'll know that actually sorting out these things is a complex process, and that's a real opportunity to think about how we want to reshape that service in the future.
Thank you, Tim. Robin, do you want to come back on the other question, please?
I'd really welcome the question from Councillor Robinson. I share the enthusiasm that Councillor Robinson has for this agenda. It's something that I think I'm really passionate about, and we do include in the update of the plan that went to Cabinet a number of examples of the way that we put this into practice. So the improvement in some of our online reporting, our online payments, there has been an absolutely enormous shift to that, obviously due to circumstance through the pandemic. There is still challenges and need to support people around digital exclusion, and those that are particularly for a variety of reasons and face challenges around that. So there's a sort of two-tier approaches. One is about improving the council, making it fit for purpose as a digital organisation. And we are a digital organisation. We have to become a digital organisation to survive. And actually, it will save resources, it will save duplication, and it will be more efficient and more responsive to our communities. But secondly, how we support greater access within our communities. So there is an example in there about the learning development we're doing through adult education with our communities, and that includes people around accessibility, languages, disability, age, poverty, and access to digital. We've funded some work in partnership with some of the voluntary sector organisations to literally put broadband and pay for broadband in some homes in our most deprived areas. There is a fundamental issue about, I think now it's almost food, warmth and digital is becoming for children and families a non-negotiable cost that we need to think about. So that's a big focus. We're working with BDUK still around improving broadband in rural areas. We are also, though, trying to support a more digitally sensitive organisation. And later on the agenda, hopefully if you have time, under the people, assets and systems item, you'll be able to come back to this as well, because the systems programme is all about that. So there's some examples about sensors around how people work, obviously supporting people to work anywhere, supporting digital working where possible, but also this isn't just about people working at home rather than the office. It's about people like environmental health, building control, out and about in frontline roles, being able to use digital better. So you'll have hopefully another go at this later, Councillor Robinson, but I totally support what you're saying. And also we are working to try and secure some funding from West Yorkshire Combined Authority to enhance digital skills within our workforce as well. So it's a big area of focus for us. Thanks.
Thank you, Robin. Bob, you were next, I think, on the list of questioners. You want to put your question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, it's good to read the progress and the achievements that's been made over this 6-month period. Just a couple of relatively smaller questions, but important, I think. Just on comment on digital democracy. The report says it's good to see that the ModGov has now been fully implemented, and I think I've seen somewhere else that there's some work going on digital democracy in finance. Could I ask, these things move on all the time, and I'm sure we're getting a programme of further work on this. Could you just ask what's likely to be next coming up in the pipeline now ModGov's fully implemented? And the second question on make the books balance, which is obviously an extremely critical area. The last bullet point, I can see referring to that is about this annual governance statement and statement of accounts has been reviewed in November. Could I ask, has that review now taken place, and does it give the assurances on the soundness of the council's accounting processes and resilience of the council's finances as expected?
Chair, shall I come in as so?
Please.
On the first question, from Councillor Metcalfe, it is probably better to to put that to the systems item, because the systems item will be talking about the future rollout of IT and tech later on the agenda. So, and you'll hear from the colleagues that are leading that work. And you're right, it will keep changing and evolving, and it is doing that. On the second point, the short answer is yes. Both those things have happened, and there was a formal presentation to the last audit committee on the statement of accounts, there is the annual governance statement has been signed off by myself and the leader. It's really, I think, positive to say that we had identified some previously in previous annual governance statements some risks around project management and control and risk, and I think that there's been improvements there. The other area where we have put some work in to improve our responses around business continuity and ensuring that there's effective response to crisis events. And I think, again, the challenge of the storm recently showed, certainly from the council perspective, a very strong response, although I think in terms of some of the key partners, there were some issues. So we have addressed the concerns through the governance statement as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does it require any other response there, Bob, do you think, from anybody like Councillor Tim Swift?
Well, if there is any other response coming forward, I think Robin's pretty well explained it for me. Thank you.
I'd have said the same as Robin.
It's good to see you're of the same mind. Thank you very much. Now I have Councillor Megan Swift and Councillor Dacre. Councillor Dacre, you want to come in, or is it more of a sort of more general point from yourself?
No, I'll put my hand down again because what I was going to say has been said, so there was no need to repeat it.
Good, good to hear that. So, Councillor Megan Swift, do you have a question, I think?
Thank you, Chair. This will be very short because it needs to come back on the item later on. But I didn't want Robin to go away not knowing what I was thinking. So I think there's two things as far as the simplistic amongst us. Some of the equipment that we're using isn't that up to date with them. And I know it costs a lot of money and working on it. But it would be good to feel that the equipment was there to do the jobs that we need it to do. And some is all right, it's not all of them. And the other part is, I've forgotten. The other part of it is really, why can't we have it so it does the same thing when we come on every time? You go on Zoom, some days you've got to put a password in, some days you just hit a button, and then you go over to Team and God knows what that's doing. But I would like the same instructions to come up at the beginning so I can get into what we've got to get into. Thank you. I'm gone.
Thank you, Megan. I have great sympathy with you, particularly your last comment there. I was doing a panic to get back into this one in the last minute. I lost the information. It was somewhere else. Tim, did you want to come back on that one?
I will, because I agree, and I think the issue isn't necessarily so much the age of some of the equipment. It is that consistency thing, and why. Perhaps for me, that's perhaps what we should focus on next for people is how can we make it as consistent and reliable as possible. So I think the challenge at the moment is that getting into things like Zoom meetings or team meetings is fine so everything works well. But as soon as you get a bit of a complication for those members who are less IT confident, that's when it starts to become very difficult. So I think trying to make sure that the processes are as simple and robust as possible is part of it. I think the other thing we want to see is, we've started with some versions of hybrid meetings. Actually, I found the system we've got starting to develop around using Room B compared with other hybrid meetings I've been on with other organisations actually looks quite promising, but there's a there's a way to go, and there's a bit of skill for both members and officers in that about actually how you run a hybrid meeting, which is a bit different again from running one online. So I think this isn't just about the right techie solutions, it's about things that work really well for people.
Good.
Chair, it's Robin. Can I just? Craig's on the call. I know he will deal with this in a very sophisticated and thoughtful way. But my simple answer to Councillor Megan Swift would be yes. I know it's you're not alone, and it's pretty much, I think, a cross-party political view that some of the items and kit we have isn't. It's not necessarily about the age, it's about whether or not it's fit for purpose for all users. There is a proposal coming through about how we might think about IT investment and IT infrastructure, and it will come to be considered for politicians within the budget process. We have sought to manage within the resource we have. We need to think about that in the future and what is the best fit for the organisation. So, but I'm sure Craig can say more. And it's already been logged to me as a concern. I think the practical point about the different ways of entering a meeting on Zoom or Teams, I think simply is down to depend on who and how it's set up. And fortunately with these things, there are more than one way to do it. And it just is one of those quirks of these systems that you can do things in some of those 3 or 4 or 5 ways. It depends on how it's set up. So this meeting has been set up in a different way, partly because it's a public meeting, etc., than maybe a one-to-one meeting, maybe if you had it on Zoom. So we will look at the support that all members and staff need, though, to make that work best for them. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the request would be, can we move towards some sort of common system, common way of accessing the meetings, and try and remove some of the variables which are involved. I think is central to that. Councillor Cook Jacob, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everybody. Just wanted to ask, there's a statement in there that says that they'll continue to support local communities and local businesses. It's a very broad statement, and sort of communities are not the same as businesses. So I don't know why it's grouped together in that way, but I just wanted to ask, what is the council specifically doing to support and help local businesses? We've just seen parking charges sort of increase and be extended to 8 o'clock at night, and that's hurting the hospitality sector, sort of small restaurants and things of that nature. So I mean, I don't expect an answer around particularly parking charges, but can you give more examples specifically of what the council is doing to support local businesses?
Okay, who would like to respond to that?
Thanks. Well, I mean, I'll make a brief start. I know Sylvia wants to come in as well. So over the last few months, a lot of that has been focused on the distribution of the various COVID grants and support, which has been a pretty big program of its own right. One of the useful things around that, though, has been also the extent of contacts that we've had with businesses and the information that's provided around there. Around what's happening with business. Secondly, the work around towns is very much about rethinking what town centres are going to be like going forward, and you can see some of the practical implications of that. So if you look in terms of Halifax, where perhaps that's most developed, the redevelopment of the Northgate site, the presence of the sixth form there, as well as the Peace Hall, obviously, the impacts of that on bringing new businesses into the town centre, additional football into the town centre, and the knock-on benefits that has for business. I think we'll see some similar effects with some of the other schemes there. There is quite a programme of business support that's provided both directly through the Regen program department and in partnership with the combined authority. I think that often gets reported to the place panel rather than to here, but I'm sure we could happily provide a bit of a summary note. I don't know whether either Sylvia or Robin want to add anything on that.
I see that Robin and Sylvia got their hands up. Robin, you're a bit tight for time, so if Sylvia doesn't mind, could Robin come in first, please?
Yeah, I mean, the leader has said a lot of the things that I think we do. I'd say that we have we have a huge range of programs and support to businesses and a very strong relationship with our business sector. I was with the Chamber of Commerce earlier today. We've had our Inclusive Economy Recovery Board meeting this afternoon. We have had the example of around about £1 million to support employment and skills training that we've secured through West Yorkshire Combined Authority. We have clearly had all of the town deal funding that has been secured and the work that we're doing around economic growth and support into skills with West Yorkshire Combined Authority as well. We're working with them a lot around new jobs, digital jobs and green jobs. There's a lot of work around how the economy will shift in the future and how we position ourselves well, as well as clearly some of the context of place that actually means that people are more likely to invest in Calderdale and more likely to relocate here. And we've been quite resilient in terms of our businesses through the pandemic, our manufacturing, engineering, and also digital businesses and financial services, which are our key strengths. And some of the things like the investment around the bus station, around the train station in Halifax, the development of an investment on highway infrastructure is all about supporting places where people can travel, can get to work, can get to jobs, and make our town sustainable. So it's very much a core element of everything that we do. But Councillor Dacre may want to add to that. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Dacre, Sylvia.
Well, yes, just to say that yes, in a way, really, this is a question for a different scrutiny panel. But as the form that you've got says, that we will help local businesses thrive by, and it talks about fighting for share of mayoral deal new money. And effectively, we've already succeeded in doing that by getting some of our skills and employment funding extended till next year through the lobbying we've done with West Yorkshire. But of course, another example of how we've worked particularly with Halifax businesses is supporting them in the recent Halifax Bid Referendum, so that the council provided the structure and the provision for the referendum that had to take place, because obviously it was hard for the businesses to produce that. So they did. The council provided that, and of course it was. We're all really pleased that it was the answer from the referendum was that yes, businesses in Halifax Town Centre wanted the bid to continue, and Calderdale worked closely with them during its previous iteration, and it'll carry on doing so under the new bid. And there's very close working relationships, and we'll be fully supporting them in their efforts to try and draw in some of the businesses who are perhaps not quite in the town centre, but are quite close to it. So yes, as Councillor Swift said, there's just all sorts of things going on all the time where we're working very closely with businesses to try and find out what they need, see how we can help.
Thank you, Councillor Dacre. There was a note in the notes put in by Councillor Tim Swift about his work with BID as well. So if members could note that one as well, please. Thank you for that, Tim. Anybody else that is looking to comment? I've got a couple of fairly, I suppose, detailed things really. Back on the digital front, totally in support of everything that we're trying to do to evolve and develop the digital side and so on. I just feel that maybe there's still a little bit of a reduction or a lack of sensitivity to those who aren't so digitally educated or responsive. It tends to be older people, but not necessarily the disabled and less able. I think that maybe we just need to, I know there's the odd reference in the report that I picked up there about the non-digital people, and recognising there are a significant number of those still. So I think that's something we still need to bear in mind. On the skills and talent front, I think I might have seen the word apprenticeship, but it's one of our hobby courses. I think that's an area, apprenticeship, not just, I know the councillors work quite well historically in terms of looking at apprenticeships within council, but evolving, developing, supporting apprenticeships amongst young people, not least because of the COVID situation, all the issues related to that. And carrying on with that sort of theme, I was at a meeting earlier today where we're looking at evolving the communities like the Worley and Park developments, but there is a situation where I feel that in certain parts, certainly in my own ward, there's a lack of skills and aspiration amongst people. And I think we need to work at that level as well. It's great to get the funding and the grants and so on. It's some people want to do something but don't know what they can or are able to do. And I think there needs to be perhaps a little bit more work at that level in that particular aspect. So under the skills and aspiration. And my final comment is one, I think, which I made at Cabinet on Monday. There's a very wide breadth of objectives, as Councillor Tim Swift pointed out, 88 objectives on this list. And I know some of the reasons why we don't get feedback on all of 88. I just wonder whether there is something we should be able to put in place which gives us a more ongoing, more detailed feedback across the full spectrum of objectives. Some way of doing it. At this instant, I don't know precisely, but I just throw that one into the pot as well. So really the digital side, the skills side with apprenticeships, and perhaps a broader view and understanding of how these objectives are moving forward. Don't know who wants to respond to those.
I'll let Sylvia go first, because I know she's
Okay.
quite heavily involved in some of the skills and apprenticeship work, and
Right.
also sits on the Wicked board for employment of skills.
Thanks. Yes, so there are, I mean, part of the problem is that there's almost too many different things going on at different levels to try to deal with some of the skills and employment issues. But again, and we'd be here all night if we tried to talk about them all. But there is a lot going on. Just if I can talk about apprenticeships, they were something that struggled. There was a problem during lockdown across the country, across all sectors. It was very difficult. Apprentices weren't getting taken on, and it was difficult for the council to do it. It was difficult for everybody to do it. Since things have opened up slightly, the council's been working very hard to get numbers up again. And they have had some success in that, and they've probably had more success than some businesses have had who found it really, really difficult. I hadn't appreciated till I started going to the West Yorkshire Employment and Skills Committee that parents whose children want to be apprentices lose their benefits for them, whereas if they carry on going to education, they don't. So there's a clear disincentive for young people to take up apprenticeships, which frustrates businesses no end. So a child is more likely to see a job that just pays them money now and more money as far more attractive than something that might lead to better things later on. So there's all sorts of things like that which cause problems. But as I say, the council is working really hard and itself to try to bring on its apprentices. The other thing, you talk about working at ward level. One thing the council has done and had to stop during some of COVID was going into schools, trying to actually get in there at a very local level to tell the students what was out there in terms of the council, certainly, and trying to encourage them to see the council as a place to come and work. And so they'll be wanting starting that up again. Now that assuming we don't lock down again, but that's something again that where they're really trying to get down to a local level and really touch the young people themselves. Just in terms of the digital and inclusivity, I think we've touched on this before in different meetings, and every time we do something digital, our service is made digital, we try to ensure that there is still a mechanism for those who cannot, for whatever reason, access the service digitally to still be able to be catered for, whether that's through the hubs or whether that's by perhaps providing, as Robin Tuddenham indicated earlier on, providing the equipment for them to have in the house so that they can physically have access to digital facilities. So we are very aware of that, and we do try to build it into everything that we do. And if there are examples where you find that we're not succeeding in that, and that we're effectively cutting out those who don't have the digital access, then tell us, and we can then look at how we can overcome that oversight.
Okay, yep, thank you for that. And I've also seen in the notes there that Craig is talking about. We'll pick up the inclusion issue when we get to the PAS item on the agenda. So we perhaps look for more on that at that point. I've got Robin, then Councillor Megan Swift. Robin, did you want to come in on any of that?
I was just going to say that I think picking up Craig's comment there that he might come on that, but I know Zora's also on the call, and I think just to note the support and work that public services do to enable digital access for people in our communities, and with often other public sector organisations, particularly DWP, our attempts to work around the challenges for those who are digitally excluded is really strong. And both through libraries, community hubs and other places, we play a real part in supporting people. Also through ESOL training and support with the college and through adult education. So I think we're part of the solution to this, often. So just to sort of note that, really. Thanks.
I just didn't want to let you get lost in all the excitement about digital, which is important in itself. Megan, do you want to come in on this one, I think? You're on mute at the moment.
Yeah, I should be able to think, come off mute, and it does it automatically. This is a very simple one, very, very quickly. Some of the apprenticeships in the NHS that's been set up over the last 3-4 years probably are quite good. The proper jobs, if you know what I mean, where sometimes apprenticeships don't get proper jobs. But as far as the council's concerned, if we are helping people go off to firms to get apprenticeships, do we not let them get robbed by only paying them £2.50 or something silly like that?
I can't answer that question. Can anybody else?
So, it's a really big topic. I know Councillor Dacre is very involved at this in West Yorkshire, and the leaders doing a lot of work on this as well with us. We do seek to pay fair rates. We pay within the national context. I would say that our apprenticeship programs face some challenges because of the pandemic in terms of the ability for people to learn and to get the experience that they would have had as apprentices prior to that. I think it's not been as easy. Having said that, we've got a number of apprentices in role at the moment. We have an incredible, it's something like 96% of our apprentices get a job in either the council or a partner within Calderdale at the end. So very few don't immediately go straight into employment. And we've also had internships, paid internships, I'd say, that have all gone into either a job in the council or others. So there's a way in which we're trying to build the next generation. But we've got the grow your own work we're doing in corporate projects. We're developing it in other services as well. So it's a big topic, but we are taking that role. National NHS is good because I think they have the benefit of a national infrastructure. We have a little bit of that with the Local Government Association, but we've done our own thing as well. And we are investing in apprenticeships. And we basically, I know Nigel's on the call as well, whenever a role comes up, we ask the question, could this be an apprentice? Could this be an opportunity for the next generation? And I would also say, when I say the next generation, I mean of people in local government. I don't just mean young people. So, we have had people in their 40s, late 40s, early 50s become apprentices and move into local government. We've had one really successful one in health and safety who's now, a full-time employee. So it can be in mid to later career that you become an apprentice. It's not just about 16 to 18-year-olds. Thank you.
Yeah, all I would say, that's all good stuff. My reference is also in relation to non-council working people. People outside is encouraging that side of things as well. I think that's part of our responsibility. I've got a couple of other people. Councillor Dacre, Sylvia, you wanted to come back as well, and then Susan Press.
Yeah, it was just about that point that I think Councillor Megan-Swift was referring to, what do we do about people who are going into apprenticeships elsewhere? And I think really what I said before is that you wouldn't find many people who felt that the apprenticeship system as it is really fully fit for purpose for all sorts of reasons. The ones that I mentioned about the impact on family benefits, the fact that how much they get paid, the fact that the way the levy works now has gone down very badly with businesses. So there are lots of problems with it, but Calderdale, as they do with everything, just seek to work with that system as best they can to try to ensure that the outcomes for people who get apprenticeships both within the council but elsewhere are as good as they possibly can be within the existing framework.
Fair enough. Thank you, Councillor Dacre. Councillor Press, Susan, you're...
Yeah, just a couple of points, really. Firstly, on the digital strategy, I think we'd all welcome the efforts that are being made to make things simpler and easier. And I'm also glad that we've reintroduced, because I know that I did press for that a lot myself in my time as the portfolio holder, to reintroduce the face-to-face element, and indeed to keep the face-to-face element at customer first. But actually, I think it also needs to be recognised that obviously because of the COVID situation, which clearly is going to continue, because for all kinds of other reasons, there will always be a body of people in our most deprived groups, our most vulnerable groups, who are not savvy, not only savvy with IT, but do not have access to IT, and who are going to need face-to-face help. And I'm thinking in particular of the reference to council tax, and it's not just council tax, it's things like universal credit and welfare benefits. And I'm anxious that it's recognised. I meet people all the time through my work with helping run a local food bank who are not getting the help they need because they really do not have digital skills. There's a whole bank of people out there who we need to get, who we're not getting. And we know this because we had our recent events talking to people like the CAB and Noah's Ark. There are people who desperately, urgently will always need face-to-face contact. And I'm anxious that while we press ahead with the digital advances, we do not forget, we don't forget those who need face-to-face contact, for whom digital stuff will not do the job. So yeah, I just hope that the Cabinet, as part of its priorities, is determined, as I'm sure it is, to redress whatever future gaps there might be in that provision. And I'm particularly thinking about national funding to organisations like the CAB, which did handle and do handle at the moment a lot of the DWP stuff, in particular universal credit. So I suppose what I'm asking, sorry to be long-winded, is the Cabinet still committed to making sure that there is adequate, still an adequate access, which will need ramping up, perhaps adequate access to face-to-face contact, because at the moment it's still very limited.
Good stuff, Susan. That's something I'm very keen on, so it's good to hear it on, as it were, both sides of the house type of situation. So yes, I would support that. We've done a lot on digital. We've done quite a lot on this particular item. Councillor Dacre, did you want to come again on something? There's your... Well,
only to say that I think we've already tried to answer that question and say that yes, we are committed to it.
Okay. That's fine. I think we can leave that one as a marker there. Thank you. Let's move on. I think we need to, in terms of the agenda, the next item on the agenda, item 6 on the agenda, is the medium-term financial strategy, abbreviated to the MTFS. I think our Chief Finance Officer, Nigel Broadbent, is going to lead on this one. we've all had a chance to have a look at it. Nigel, do you want to add anything at all to this?
Sorry, Chair, can I just interrupt?
Yes.
Nat Barnes needs letting into the meeting, so I don't know who's got the skill to do that.
I've already admitted him, Chair.
All right, I've just got a
Thank
message,
you.
that's all.
Thank you. Good evening, Mike. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, evening.
Good evening. And yes, the MTFS. Sorry, that confused me now. Nigel, away you go.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this very brief because, as you say, hopefully members will have had a chance to have a read through this, particularly as it's been approved by both Cabinet and Council in November. I think the only thing I'd probably add to this is just to say that, as with any forecast, it's prepared at a moment in time, and we plan to do an update to the medium-term financial strategy to Cabinet in January, at the meeting on the 17th of January. By that time, we should have the local government finance settlement. So we'll know with more certainty what funding is going to be available to the council next year. We'll review some of the assumptions that are set out in the report in terms of, in particular, things around pay and inflation, and in particular around energy inflation. And then we'll just have another look at the risks involved. But as the report sets out, the main risks are probably still there around existing budget pressures, which you're well aware of from the revenue monitoring reports, around the ongoing impact of COVID, and in particular on things like income, on parking, sports services, etc. Inflation and pay, I've mentioned, again, key risks. And on top of that, probably national developments in local government, on local government finance, fair funding reviews, that kind of thing. So all that will need to be reviewed, but we'll put it into a revised report, which will go to Cabinet in January, just to set out how the picture will have changed by that time. We're going to advance the budget process for next year so that Cabinet can prepare its own consultation budget, but all groups can obviously look at their own budget proposals in advance of Council on the 28th of February. And I'll pause there.
Thank you very much. Just a quick one before I throw it open to everybody. Have a think about the questions, guys. Do we know anything more on the sort of 1 year, 3 year thing? And do we have any more hope that we're going to get a 3 year situation rather than the 1 year one?
The short answer to that is no, we don't know anymore. I'm hoping that we get 3 years, even if the second and third years are indicative. It may well be that if the government wants to progress the fair funding review, which will reallocate resources across different types of authority across the country, it might well be that we get, certainly first year has to be fixed, years 2 and 3, we might get indicative figures for that, but that's pure speculation on my part rather than any knowledge at this stage. Okay, fair enough. And I suppose my only other grumble in all of this is the proscriptive way that government tends to operate in terms of funding and minimise local decision making in terms of the use of funds and things. And I guess we're not making any progress in that sort of area either, in terms of having more decisions made locally. I have to say I have some sympathy with our cabinet when it comes to those sorts of things because of the issues and the knock-on effect. But again, any news on that subject? I think in terms of maybe Councillor Swift might want to come in, but in terms of the discretion, obviously more discretion through the new arrangements, through the combined authority, the mayoral arrangements. But in terms of local government finance, I think some of the intentions around things like business rates, retention, etc., have been shelved now. So we await a fair funding review, which still seems to be on the agenda, but I think business rates is something that's been kind of deferred for at least the time being. Really, yeah. Did you want to come in on that, Tim, or you were just nodding in agreement? I think.
Yeah, basically agree. There is no sign at the moment of a shift away from bidding, and indeed, I think we found since we've had the mayoral combined authority that there has been really a shift back on devolution in my view, in that there has been a requirement for the mayors for the mayoral combined authority to bid for funds rather than getting an allocation in the way that was happening 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah. I have to admit that was one of my concerns about mayoralities anyway, but there we go. We have hands up from Councillor Metcalfe. Bob, you want to come in? And Megan, I think Megan Swift wants to come in. Bob.
Thank you, Chair. As Nigel said, obviously this has been through full council approval. So I'll just ask one fairly brief question. I was just looking looking at the stuff on the sensitivity analysis and where it talks about key variables being modelled. And one thing very much in the news at the moment, it's certainly going to affect everyone, is the rise in energy prices. And we know that those are going to be really rocketing and have really rocketed. And in those sensitive analysis, it talks about the 5% we have currently in, I think, budgeted for in this. It's at the worst case, it's going to triple that. So it's going to rise to 15% in the worst case. And looking on the forecast for the next three years or so, the budget forecast from next year, there's nothing above that, or is it 5% still factored in? There's nothing showing us any increase in what we've factored in for increases in energy prices, which we know are going to happen. So it's just a query on a clarification on just understanding why we're not putting anything, if we're not, further in to cover increased in energy prices. I know the increase is different to domestic probably in areas like council and businesses, but nevertheless, this sensitivity analysis just talk about a possible tripling of the current 5% that's now already there.
Anything on that, Nigel?
Yes, at the time of writing the MTFS, we assumed 5% increases in energy per annum. And I think, as you say, we'd assume something like in the worst case scenario, maybe a tripling of that. I think on this occasion, I've probably been overly optimistic. It has to be said, the more recent information from YPO suggests that the energy price rises next year will be even greater than that. So as part of the update that I'll be providing to Cabinet in January, I will be updating the figures for a much greater increase. Now, the latest information is that might be, I wouldn't say a one-off increase, but hopefully wouldn't be something that would continue to increase in future years and might at least be a temporary increase, but it's something that clearly we will need to adjust the standstill budget for, because that 5% and even the 15% I think is going to be wholly insufficient as we stand at the moment.
Yeah, so we'll keep our eyes on that one. Thank you for that.
Does that have a significant effect on the budget? I'm trying to think just what our energy costs are at the present time.
It will have, yes. Our energy costs are probably something in the region of £3 million a year. So you can see that, yes, it could be quite significant, an increase of the order of certainly in double figures.
Right.
Double figure percentages, sorry.
Yeah. Councillor Megan Swift, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I put it down, Chair, because Bob came up with a couple of things I wanted to know. And I didn't think that Nigel would appreciate it going back to the apprenticeship to see whether we'd looked at having an apprentice for his role when he goes.
We're interviewing for how can we possibly replace Nigel though eventually, but there we go. He's going to leave us come what may, so we're going to have to try and find somebody. There we go. But thank you for that, Nigel. Any other questions or comments from anybody else on the MTFS? As I think Nigel said in the introduction, it has had a fair airing across a number of areas. Am I missing a hand? Oh, good. Thank you very much. We'll move on then. Now, we were going to go on to people, assets and systems, but we're slotting in the the problem debt report at this point, I think, are we not, Lauren?
Yes, that's right, Chair. I think
Good.
Mike's going to pitch in. He's just been raising his hand, if that's okay.
Yes, well, your members will have had some involvement anyway, because the members have been on that organisation. You'll have seen reports and a slightly updated one. The purpose of this item on this agenda is to discuss it and eventually, hopefully, approve the report and its recommendations for submission to Cabinet. I think we're aiming at February, is it, Lauren, on this one, to get this to Cabinet?
Chair, shall I briefly introduce?
Yes, please, Mike.
And thank you very much, Chair. And I will be brief. And the first thing I'd like to do is thank the members of the working group who looked at this, who put a great deal of effort and thought into it. And I think you as members have produced a good report and raised the profile of several important issues. I suppose that's a little bit of a request that we don't rerun the whole debate this evening, but just pick up on additional points. So to pick up Councillor Evans' comment, yes, Cabinet has a very busy agenda for January, so we've been asked to bring any recommendations you choose to make this evening to the February meeting of the Cabinet. I think I'd also like to, while we're doing thank Lauren for all the work she put in on organising and rearranging meetings and pulling the report together and drafting and redrafting. I can't remember whether it was version 8 or version 9 was the final draft. It was not quite the big numbers that Nigel was used to, but it was a big number. And also to thank actually Sarah Richardson, who supported us in this work and has helped us through one or two knotty problems and continues to help us through one or two knotty problems on this. In the report, we make reference to the suggestion that a debt forum should be established, and that's one of the issues I've discussed with Sarah Richardson. When we got to the final drafting, Lauren and I debated putting that in as an additional recommendation, but we hadn't had a chance to discuss that with members, so it felt wrong for us to put in a recommendation of our own without that discussion. I know it's a recommendation that Sarah would welcome, and if it's okay with you, Chair, all we need to do is add somewhere into the minutes. I think the Assistant Director Customer Services is asked to establish a debt forum, and that would be if you like, a sort of subgroup of the anti-poverty group that looks in particular at debt issues.
Certainly very happy with that. We'll just need to get confirmation from the rest of the group, but sorry, Mike, please carry on.
And I think there's possibly one little bit of tidying up to ensure that we've got the vocabulary right about the difference between debt advice and debt advocacy. So if we could have a permission to do a little bit of tidying up, that we know more than vocabulary, it wouldn't change any sense of the report. It just makes sure that we're using the right terms and we don't confuse people on that. I think that's all I need to say, Chair. As I say, that the members of the working group have done a very thorough job. I'm sure when you take it to Cabinet in February, Cabinet may have a response then or afterwards. And I've nothing further to add.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, and I echo the thanks for all of those which have been involved. I think it's a good piece of work, and we're going to get some good benefits out of it. I've got a couple of hands up at the moment. Councillor Press, Susan, you were there, I think, first out the traps. Some comments?
Well, yeah, I'm often first out of the traps. No, I don't really want to add very much. I think it's thanks, Lauren, for all the work you've done on this. Just wanted to draw attention really to two things. One was we spoke about targeting and raising awareness of the help that's available for people with problem debt. And again, I just wanted to reference back that we've done this in the past with discretionary housing payment, which used to have a very low take-up. Money available from the government to help people bridge the gap between market rents and what they're actually given by the government. we did an awareness raising campaign on that, and it really was a game changer. So if we're going to stop people getting into problem debt in the first place, I'm asking Cabinet to really zoom in, and it doesn't have to cost much because we've already got a very good comms team and awareness, a targeted PR campaign, working with officers to let people know, because they don't always know that the help is there. And as I said earlier, and I won't repeat it, other than to say there's a lot of people out there who don't know what they're entitled to, and it's our job to make sure that they do know. And I think I'll leave it there, because the rest of it is all in the report. And I do hope that we can get some comeback after the February Cabinet meeting, because obviously a couple of us may not be standing again. So yeah, if you could do that, I'd be really grateful.
Yeah, and I very much agree with the awareness thing, Susan. I think that's a very important aspect. Councillor Sutherland, Dan, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair, and for everybody who contributed to the report. It is very good and thorough, and I think overall it picks up that people who are in problem debt have a number of other issues that are present in their life, mental health being one of them, and this issue being something that exacerbates it and makes the issue more difficult to deal with. I think the point of the Council looking at its own processes to see how it can perhaps in many ways lead the way in a not saying it doesn't do a lot of good at the moment, but there have definitely been cases that have been raised with me where I feel the Council could have been kinder in its approach. And as Susan pointed out, there's a number of areas where people would be able to access grants and other support, and perhaps we might be able to more effectively collect our council tax by looking at it a bit more laterally and seeing how we can support people in problem debt so that they don't get into debt with us, they don't get into debt with anybody else. I won't go over the thing on face-to-face again. Other people have raised it. I think in this field it's even more important that we have that there, especially in the context of, Bob was just mentioning, it would have been my question about what we do about inflation as a council, but that pressure, particularly around heating, is faced even more strongly by people on fixed incomes. And that issue, if it continues to go as predicted, is going to become much worse. And a lot more people may be tipped into debt and needing support because of inflationary pressures. And even if the government does make changes to universal credit, for example, that's unlikely to keep up with the pace of change, and people might need some help in the to keep them above the water, both to keep them financially sound, but keeping people mentally sound. Because once they tip over into that level, a number of other things can fall apart, and that's not where we want to get to.
Thank you for that. Yes, I mean, one of my thoughts is that it's an interesting one, following on from what Councillor Sutherland has just said there, that historically CAB tell us that a lot of the debt related to credit card debt or rent-to-own purchases, but now the tendencies tends to be in relation to tax credit overpayments, benefit overpayments, and council tax arrears. It's all of those areas which are much more, which closer to home to us as a council, which are driving people into problem debt. And I recognise those are difficult areas to work on, but I think we need to be aware that those are drivers for those who are going into problem debt. Councillor Megan Swift, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, you just made me think when you mentioned CAB.
Hey, I made you think. That's good.
Yeah, they work a lot face to face. They don't do as much now as they used to. I don't know how you get into a position that you can help, because a lot of these people are so frightened that when they go to the CAB, they've got to carry a bag full of envelopes that they haven't opened, and the bailiff's coming to look at evicting them. We have to find a way. I mean, we can't tell people we'll let them stop paying council tax because we need it, but we need a way to get to them early before A, they made themselves ill, and B, finding a way out of it will be much, much harder. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Councillor Barnes would like to come in, please, Chair.
Yes, thank you. I couldn't see your hand up, Mike. I was just surprised that you hadn't got stuck into this one already. Oh, where you go? Sorry.
I was keeping my powder dry, Chair.
Oh,
I think I would just like to say a couple of things, really. I think that I'd like to thank both the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats for their positive engagement from when we first introduced this motion into Council at the Minster, which was a bit warmer than it probably is tonight, if we're being honest. And I think I think when all parties work together, I think you can get some really good reports, and I think this is one of them. I'd like to thank the engagement of Sian and Sarah Richardson on this. I think that they've really contributed heavily to this. And finally, and it must have been like painting the fourth road bridge for us of a certain age, to Lauren, because I don't know how many iterations and tweaks and changes she made, and she's put up with us with good grace. So I would like to thank all of those individuals. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Dacre.
It was just to say, and I hope nobody said this because I just had to leave the room for a moment, but in terms of people in council tax difficulties, I think Sarah's somewhere on the call, and I gather that you're already looking at trying to get some extra staff in on a short-term basis to assist with people who we know already are or are going to be suffering with council tax difficulties, to try to stop people getting to try and manage it, to stop it getting so bad that we end up having to take them to court or things like that. So I think that's a positive step. I hope I'm right in my understanding of that, Sarah.
Sarah, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, just to confirm, that's absolutely right, Councillor Dacre. As part of the work that the Scrutiny Board did, we've looked at council tax arrears, and it's clear that the situation is worsening. We're getting more people who are getting reminders and summons, and it's really important that, as Councillor Sutherland said, that we play our part in being kind around this, and that we try and get in as early as possible to support people to make sure that they don't get into a position where they are in problem debt. So we will be working with colleagues in council tax over the next couple of months to get that in place.
That's good to hear. I mean, it's like a lot of things, isn't it? It's like I did a lot of work in CYP a while ago. It was all about early intervention with young people. You intervene early and it's less of a problem long term. It's this very similar thing, the situation you're describing here. So the earlier we can get in and work with people who are going initially into debt before it becomes horrendous, the better. So that's good to hear. Thank you for that. Bob, you have got your hand up. Did you want to come on this one?
Yes, that unlocked. Yeah, thank you. I just want to obviously add my thanks to Lauren and Mike for all their tremendous work on this review. It is a significant piece of work, which is resulting, I think, in a number of very relevant recommendations, and probably some of those are more challenging than others, but nevertheless, a good number of really sound recommendations. I think if those are actioned, it will result in some real improvements we'll see in tackling this concerning issue. So I think it's a well worth piece of work that's being carried out here.
Good, thank you, Bob. Councillor Lynn, Jenny, welcome. You got a comment to make?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I just wanted to highlight recommendation 4, which I think referred to an issue which came up, and I think it was raised by both Noah's Ark and by Citizens Advice at the session that you had quite recently that I attended. And I think it was, I'm assuming, I just wanted to sort of check with Mike and Lauren, that I'm assuming that referred to the comments that were made about changes in the way in which central government is allocating and chunking up the money that's given to organisations offering support for problem debt. And I think that what I came away from was with quite a degree of concern, really, that as of April next year, our local Citizens Advice have done such a fantastic job, and an organisation like Noah's Ark may no longer be funded in the same way are able to provide that face-to-face support to the same extent. So I just wanted to check that it was that recommendation 4 that actually related to that, and that hopefully that is something which perhaps if members are minded to do that would be something where we would actually be wanting to draw central government's attention to that, really, because it for me, it was one of the most concerning things that I heard in that session. Thank you.
Yeah, indeed, Lauren, Mike, I think that's very much the case, isn't it? I think Susan was confirming that as well.
That's right, Chair. Yes, that's correct. Councillor Lynn's correct.
Good. Okay. Can't see any other hands on this one. I've just got a couple of comments. Obviously, okay, I've been involved. I think it's a good piece of work, a very good piece of work. There is an underlying issue of funding, which was being highlighted there by Councillor Lynn to an extent as well, which is going to affect some of those recommendations. I'm still a little bit concerned about the level of involvement or lack of involvement from the DWP. I feel that we still need to do something on that. I'll come on to Mike. Mike had just raised his hand briefly there. The CAB situation we've referred to. And I personally still have reservations about the drive by some organisations for people to go into personal bankruptcy on these issues because of the knock-on effects. Mike, you wanted to come back on one of my comments, I think.
Yes, Chair. So, I meant to mention the DWP, and I said Sarah was helping us with one or two thorny problems. We've had some diary management issues with the DWP, but in the report we said that we will make contact with the DWP, and Sarah's going to help with that. And so by the time we bring the report to Cabinet in February, we will have had a discussion with the DWP about this report and its recommendations.
And we could add an addendum or whatever based on that, could we, to that report? Yeah.
I think, yes, Chair, we'll use the mechanism of a covering report with this report to make those additions, and assuming that members agree, to add the recommendation about the debt forum.
Yeah. Good. Right, okay. So I don't think there are any other comments to be taken. Can I take it to a vote? I think we need to take a vote on whether we accept the report and recommendations as it stands, but with a couple of minor additions which Mike mentioned a little earlier. Are we happy to move to that? I will propose that we do that. Would somebody like to second that?
Second that.
Bob, I think, is seconding that. And those in favour of accepting this report and its recommendations? Good. Thank you very much. Thank you for that and for all those involved. Moving on to the item 7 on the agenda, People, Assets and Systems Programme. This is an item following an introductory item presented to the board in August, where it was proposed that a more detailed discussion take place to focus on the 3 strands of people, assets and systems of the Council's organisational recovery work. Therefore, we've got a number of people who will be here to present to us various aspects of it. I think Zora perhaps is going to lead off, and then some of our officers are going to deal with the more specialist areas. What I would suggest to members of the scrutiny panel is that perhaps we listen to all of the presentations from individuals and you make notes along the way rather than breaking the whole thing up. So I'm going to suggest that the presentation is done to us. We make notes in relation to each area and then we'll ask questions of clarification and so on. So Zora, are you kicking off on this one?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll introduce it if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, then. So I think in terms of context, I think we all know where we are. And as an organisation, we've gone through a period of unprecedented change over the last 20 months plus. But what that's been able to do is to accelerate much of the transformation that had already been planned or had already been started within the council. And, you know, and we've learnt some good practice, some really good ways of working. We've also learnt things that perhaps didn't go as well as they might have done. And we've been able to sort of reflect on that. And I think running parallel to this, and again, I guess timing is quite pertinent insofar as our approach has been flexible, it's been responsive, and illustrated by the fact that as we've been sat at this meeting, I've called a meeting for tomorrow afternoon of the Business Continuity Group to reflect and review and implement the changes announced by the Prime Minister this afternoon. So as an organisation, we've got to be fleet of foot, we've got to be able to respond quickly. And that's what the People Assets System Group does alongside our business continuity work. And I think, in terms of us as an organisation and our recovery from COVID, and as we start to learn to live with the virus and take our organisation forward, this sits very much in parallel to the work that colleagues in Regeneration are doing around that wider inclusive economy plan and how that looks at Calderdale the place. And what our People, Assets and Systems does is it looks at the role of us as an organisation within that, both in terms of as an employer, as a service deliverer, and as a commissioner as well. And so joining me tonight, I've got 3 of the experts in those areas that lead on those individual strands. I've got Jackie Addison with us who leads on people, obviously our head of HR and OD. I've got Alan Lee here as our corporate lead for assets from our CAFM service area. And last but not least, I've got Craig Chew-Moulding here as our corporate lead for the system side of this work. And each of those colleagues will be able to go through in any detail and respond to more detailed questions that you may have. In terms of the overall highlights of the programme, we've attached for you our portfolio initiation documents. We've captured some of the recent milestones and some of the high-level highlights of the work that we've been doing. But again, it's a moving feast, and it's something which does keep on changing as well. But happy to either pass straight over to colleagues now, Chair, or whether or not you would just want to sort of elected members to come in and ask questions of colleagues.
I think I'd quite like us to carry on so we get a full picture, really. So who's first in terms of the other 3 areas?
Okay, well, I'll bring Jackie in first, if only because the acronym PAS, our people are our most important asset. So we tend to start with our people first.
Fine, good start.
Okay, if that's okay, Chair, I'll come in there if that's all right with you.
Yes.
Good evening, members. So basically the people side, as Zora's just alluded to, obviously we've put an awful lot of resource around our people in terms of supporting them through the current working practices, those that are at work, of course we can't forget those that have continued to deliver frontline services, and also those approximately 1,500–1,600 staff that we've enabled to work from home with the technology that I'm sure Craig will cover later on. In terms of what we've done, we've tried to flex all our HR policies, rewritten or revised a number of those to accommodate the change in working practice. I've worked very closely with Employee Reference Group, which is the voice of our people, to try and obviously bring those staff with us and be part of our journey and obviously influence that going forward. And also the trade unions and the different network groups that we've got set up across the authority, which is LGBT, BAME, disabilities, making sure that people have got a voice and the employee engagement through the digital platforms that we've got to facilitate that collaboration and making sure that those people are heard. We've had a number of surveys out over the past 12 months to try and make sure that we continue to keep abreast of what staff want, particularly around reward and recognition. To make sure that obviously people have got everything that they need going forward in terms of not just it being able to give people a pay award, because that's just not possible in the climate that we're in, although we're currently at the table discussing that at the moment, but also looking at wider sort of pay and reward to retain and attract employees to the organisation. We know that it's been a significant challenge for other organisations and other councils. Just looking at the stats, we've managed to continue to retain 89% of the workforce. So it's currently stable, but I think we are seeing definitely an increase in people that are deciding to leave the council, retire early, etc. So that's a concern for me. The workforce in itself, stabilising that, retaining what we've got, the experience, and building on that. And I think the HR policies have helped us enormously in terms of flexibility, because people can obviously work from home now and can obviously move around much easier than as was. I think the investment that's gone into our staff is definitely, you know, a plusage for us, shall we say, because staff are seeing that we are trying to be flexible with them and bring them with it and retain them, bring them with us, should I say, and retain them as well within the workforce. So we've done quite a bit of work around staff wellbeing, of course, terms and conditions, workforce campaigns, you know, making sure that they're engaged within those, as I've already said. And, you know, the various groups that I've already alluded to, and obviously working really closely with our trade unions. I don't think I need to say anything I don't think I need to say anything further on that unless you want anything further from me, members.
I think that's a good starting point, Jackie. Thank you, and I'm sure people will pick things up when we come round back to things. So, working at the facilities side, Catherine aspect next, are we?
Yes, if I can bring Alan in, please, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Chair. And ironically, what I'll say is that the assets work stream, as with the rest of the work streams, is also about people. And it's also about services. And that's the focus of the whole organisational change programme. It's about people and it's about services. So I've got just a small number of recent updates to reflect the focus on service delivery. As Zora's already referred to, we've been through a major redesign and reset of our office space that's been allocated and agreed through the office accommodation strategy. And that's been completed and it's operational and it's being used now. We've also hit some big milestones with significant frontline service developments across different parts of the organisation. Again, just to demonstrate the reach and breadth of the work that we're doing. We've delivered a major remodelling and refurbishment of Elland Library to extend and modernise facilities, to integrate wider provision and to release assets, so improve our efficiency. We've completed on a purchase of a home for our children looked after to reduce reliance on expensive external placements, miles from home. Again, improving efficiency and improving the way that we deliver our services. We've completed the repurposing, remodelling and refurbishment of Westgarth into an adults respite care hub. And I was actually there on Friday afternoon, and that's a fantastic facility, which is going to complete well. And I can see Councillor Porritt's on the line as well. And I think we bumped into each other as you were leaving and as I was arriving. I think you'd agree. Fantastic facility there that's going to transform service delivery for some quite vulnerable adults. Also, building on the success of a previous £3 million bid, we've recently submitted an application for a further £1.7 million to replace the life expired heating system at Todmorden Sports Centre with a low carbon alternative. We passed a technical assessment on that and we're expecting a full decision next month. So fingers crossed on that one. So I think I've used this phrase before, a little bit of something for everyone. The work that we're doing is cutting across the whole organisation, the wide ranges of users of our services. We're currently progressing a piece of work to better integrate our service and property planning to try and mainstream the management of ongoing change. It'll always be a challenge because we're such a large, complex and dynamic organisation, particularly going through the level of change that we're going through at the moment. And we've got lots of moving parts as an organisation, but it's more important than ever that we align and use our resources wisely. I'll pause there. Thanks, Chair.
Nice, succinct. Thank you very much for that. And moving on to the systems side, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll bring Craig in.
Thank you. Good evening, members, colleagues. I think I'll just initially just focus on some of the sort of key elements of the systems programme. So some of the main areas we've been really focusing on has been around providing a robust infrastructure to allow the organisation to be as flexible as possible. And I think we've gone through this in different scrutiny panels and all member briefings, but making sure that the flexibility of its future operations is for whether colleagues, members, officers are either in the office, at home, mobile in the field, or the hybrid of all that kind of work. So we're doing a lot of infrastructure work, so trying to improve our VPN connections. So as we have more remote connections from people working from either home or other remote locations, we want to make sure that the infrastructure is robust and allows people to work effectively from wherever they may be. There's also been looking at secure data and systems. So that's key around our data resilience and cyber security. So pieces of work including disaster recovery resilience, about how we spread our servers that are on premise across different sites to make sure we're resilient. It's about having secure cloud backups. So if we do have any disaster recovery, we've got very secure data, not just on site, but elsewhere in the cloud. Members and everyone in the organisation has undergone this recent cyber training, one of our biggest threats, if you like, and that's certainly part of the Calderdale resilience. So quite often we talk about the environmental impacts, which are huge. Actually, cyber is a real significant one. So we know that a number of different local authorities across the UK have been hit by cyber attacks, and it's taken them back to paper and pen and real having no access to their data or systems. So we want to be as resilient as we can. And obviously that's not just about the technology, but again, that's about the people. So that cyber training was a really important part. And also looking at all our devices, because they're not just all in our buildings now, they're remote and connected elsewhere. So we've improved our device protection, antivirus if you were at home. In the past, what we've done, it relied on being on the council network, but now as long as you've got an internet connection, you will get the council updates and your devices will be as protected as possible. So we've put a lot of effort into making sure we've got much more resilience and cyber savvy in that respect. It's probably just touching about what Alan just said. There's actually a people element to this. So when we talk about digital and systems, everyone always thinks it's all about IT, technology, but digital is as much about culture as it is technology. So it's about ensuring we have good digital services and picking up about what other people have mentioned about if we go digital, we can't leave the excluded behind. One of the key ethoses to me is if we can cater and provide good digital services to the citizens that want that, that releases the capacity internally and manages that demand to release that capacity to look after those that are at most need, which are the ones that are excluded. So it's pertinent that we provide really good digital online services, because that allows us to then support those that are most in need. And internally, picking up what Councillor Robinson mentioned as well, it's about having good internal systems. It's about being efficient. It's about what we can automate to make ourselves as efficient as possible. Again, that supports how we sort of support our most vulnerable citizens and businesses. And different services are on completely different parts of that journey. We've got customer services, you know, they're really kind of leading the field there. So they're working on online forms to ensure that we've got efficient online services. They're using chatbots to try and engage and take some of the capacity and to relief to the customer service contact centre. So all those different channels, you know, they're looking at face-to-face, they're looking at the telephone, they're looking online. So designing any service is about what the user wants. Quite often what we'll think about is systems, right? We'll buy a system, how does that solve the problem? Turn on its head, digital transformation is about looking at what the problem is and then looking at how the technology can support solving that problem. So going back to Councillor Metcalfe's point about what's next in digital democracy terms, well, actually what we need to do is engage with members and actually understand what the problems are, which then informs what the next steps and what technology might help them support that. So it's about working and sort of understanding all those challenges and then moving that kind of forward and designing and using the appropriate technology to solve those problems. One of the elements I'm going to extrapolate on from one of the appendices was a mention of the refresh of the digital strategy. So we're kind of refreshing that at the moment into a kind of a digital Calderdale presence, and I'm trying to focus that on some real key foundations, kind of looking at digital inclusion, which is obviously a really important part of the digital council, which fits into what I've just discussed about us being as digital as possible to support those that want to be digitally engaged, to ensure that then we can support those that are most vulnerable. Looking at connectivity, and that's all about broadband provision. That's broadband provision for communities in rural areas, but it's also about that gigabit connectivity to support our businesses as part of that recovery process. And looking at data and insights, actually, how are we using our data or using it effectively to make them inform decision making and the interventions? But just coming back to digital inclusion, because I know it's been a key theme across a number of different meetings, and only last week I must have had 4 back-to-back meetings with different services and organisations on digital inclusion. So it's really high on a number of services agendas. What we've done is working with a number of different organisations. We've got a digital inclusion network, so we've got a number of services from within the council. We've got a number of third sector organisations and private sector organisations coming together, where we can try and use the power of the collective people to understand what the problems are and how collectively we can solve some of those. So working with St Augustine's, we had to work with Lloyds Bank as well. So they've got lots of provision, they've got lots of resources. So it's not just about what the council can provide, but how can we work with partners to look at what they can provide. So we're working with St Augustine's to look at providing an inclusion hub. So it's almost like a bit of an IT suite with training to help those non-English speaking citizens to start engage more, so they are digitally excluded. So what we want to do is create a pilot exercise to look at how we can engage with those, how we can support that, and then how we scale that kind of provision up to support other vulnerable sectors within society. Working with a CCG on laptop lending schemes, how can we repurpose laptops and get them out to citizens, businesses, schools, children that are vulnerable, and how we can try and provide them with data and devices. And we're working with the West Yorkshire Pound Authority. We're also securing mobile devices and data contracts for a range of different organisations, working with Ryburn House as part of Calderdale, again working with St Augustine's, and how we can get mobile devices out there for those that need to interact digitally. People have mentioned Universal Credit, which is an online kind of interaction. So those people that are vulnerable and are excluded can struggle in that sense. So it's about working with not just the council, but working with a range of partners, both third sector and private, to understand actually how we can solve some of these problems as a collective. And again, we're going to start feeding all this back into the various work streams of the economic inclusive recovery work. So it's really important we join all this up, because there's lots of conversations going on, and I think the power of that kind of collective will be really important. So I just wanted to highlight that there are significant steps and work going on across the sector in terms of digital inclusion. So just to provide some reassurance to members. And I'll leave that there.
Thank you, Craig. And thank you, Fisora, to you and your team. A nice, clear and concise set of presentations. Thank you very much. I think that's been very useful. It's always good when you can get that sort of thing on top of all the paper or digital stuff on the screen you've been reading through, which helps, particularly the older people in this group with the white hair and things like that, or lack of hair in some cases. Let's ask any questions, clarifications we're looking for, and I would target you in the direction, when you look at some of the papers, there's some specific objective areas. Objective 1, which is sort of key results for people. Objective 2, key results for assets. Key results in Objective 3 for systems. And there is a key milestones list on the back of one of the reports, which I found very interesting. I'd perhaps like to come back to later if others don't mention it. But are there members of the panel who wish to ask questions of any of the individuals who presented? I think you might have stunned them into silence there, Zora and Co. I can't see a hand up. Oh, it's a can. I missed one there. Where's it gone?
Councillor Metcalfe, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Metcalfe.
Yes, it was. I'll just break the ice on questions, and it was just one that's actually cropped up in the cabinet priorities that I was interested in reading, which I didn't know about, on people particularly, and that's the that's regarding the talent management programme. It reads quite interesting. It's something I've not heard about before that we're actually operating, especially in-house. And I just wondered if that programme already does, or as a possibility of attracting new recruits to Calderdale Council to work for us. Is it something that can be used both for in-house staff and as a wider role in attracting more people to be interested in joining us?
Is that one for you, Jackie, or?
Yeah, I don't mind taking that one if that's okay. So Councillor Metcalfe and others, yeah, it's a programme that we've been developing for some time, really, growing our own. Apprenticeships, internships, you've mentioned apprenticeships earlier, and I didn't want to interrupt and come in there, but I can cover that as well. And looking at the wider, sort of growing our own leaders, future leaders, workforce planning really in a nutshell is what I'm referring to. And we're doing an awful lot of work around what we're calling visioning days, working with the commercialisation team to look at some of the areas that we are struggling to either recruit or retain. So the obvious ones are legal, finance, planning, certain other aspects, unique posts as well. So we're looking at those with a view to saying, okay, so we know that people are going to retire generally, we all do. what are we doing in terms of developing our small cohort of workforce? And I can give you an example of that in one of my own teams, health and safety. Five staff. Robin talked earlier about how we've managed to attract apprenticeships. Not only have we attracted one, we've attracted 3 over the time. Lee Broadbent was the first person. He's now at the point where he's going through a management programme. Martin's mentoring him. So Lee's a real success story, alongside his brother, of course, Mark, that does our digital side of things. But in the health and safety team, just sticking with that for the moment, following that, I brought in 2 further apprentices. Leanne, who is now in our Greens, I can never say it, GSSS, Greens, I can't say it, former Safer, Cleaner, Greener team, basically, Green Space. And
Green Spaces and
there you go.
team.
I've got it, thank you, Zara. So we've got Leanne that came in as an apprentice. She's gone through all the qualifications. Martin's mentored her, and so has Lee, alongside Richard, 2 apprentices, mature apprentices that Robin referred to earlier. And Leanne is now down working with Zora's team on the frontline staffing, where we have the majority of people that are in a higher risk area delivering those really important services for the green space and street scene. I'll say it eventually. And the highway stuff, the salt, gritting, etc. So a real success story. And then also a real success is the fact that, generally speaking, Martin used to describe health and safety as middle-aged men at a certain age coming up to retirement and with no succession planning. We've now got 2 females in that team, which is a massive success, and everybody's trying to poach our staff. So that's the sort of thing that I'm trying to roll out across the authority, and try and reduce the number of reliance on interim posts, for example, our solicitors. So there's a massive programme going on there, just to answer that question. Councillor Metcalfe. Apprenticeships, very quickly, just to touch on the bits that Robin covered. We have seen a reduction this year because of the pandemic. It's not been as easy to recruit. Obviously, we haven't had the opportunities either, but what we've done is transferred it all onto digital, and we're starting to now build a lot of our work around schools. I'm hoping that, recent announcements won't change that, but everything that we're doing is to try and attract staff of all ages. Apprenticeships is open to all ages, but predominantly it does seem to attract 18 to 24-year-olds, which is the biggest impacted group throughout the pandemic. I don't know if you want me to say anything more on that.
Thank you for that, Jackie. Was that okay for Bob? Yeah. You asked the question.
Thank you. That was very interesting. Yeah. It's really pleasing to see the work that's going on in this area.
Absolutely. Yeah. Councillor Robinson, George, you had your hand up, I think.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you to officers for the report. It's really very interesting. My question, probably directed towards Craig, it's about about systems, and sometimes it can be quite difficult as a councillor looking into what the council will do, because we get the issues, but we're a bit removed from the processes, from what happens when an issue, for example, for a resident is reported. How then does that get fed through the process to a resolution at the end? I think probably the best way to think about technology in this is it's a bicycle for the mind. In some ways, it sounds cliche, but technology, it improves things by making things more efficient. It reduces errors. Technology could actually be used, and here I'm talking about the customer service experience primarily. Technology could be used to keep residents updated on their issues as well. At the moment, when I'm looking at, speaking about specifically about customer service, because when you speak about tech, it could be going on about anything, but speaking about customer service, when a resident reports an issue, that issue gets fed into customer first, and then customer first feed it to the department, and then the department feed it back to customer first, and then customer first feed it onto the resident. Essentially, customer first is the middleman. So it's the element to which technology could actually get the resident's issue direct to the department, and then the department have a system in place to then notify the resident of progress towards that issue. I'm just really wondering what Craig's take on this is. The technologies fit within Calderdale's customer service. Do you think our customer service utilises technology such as that, what I've just discussed. And the other thing is, if technology makes officers more efficient, I seem to recall that Office 365 was funded by a capital programme, was it, by prudential borrowing? And essentially we can make officers more efficient through capital, which is quite a huge opportunity, really. So I'm just wondering about Craig's take on that. Thank you, Chair.
I can cover them 2 points. Thanks for that question. So in terms of the customer first element and the customer, the cycle, if you like, of reporting through to updating, that was a recognised challenge from previous years, where actually, in terms of demand management, that just wasn't working. All it was doing is customers not being updated, and therefore more contact coming to the council, creating more strain officers, but more importantly, frustrating residents from what they've been reporting. So kind of a blueprint was created on how we did that. So at the time I was working in the transformation team, where we actually worked with colleagues from a whole range of different services to look at, focused on fly tipping, which we know is a common complaint. So what we've done is actually look at the entire kind of process around that and done a complete redesign of what information, where does it need to come, where does it need to go, and how do we actually automate that so it's actually something that that manages the demand by updating accordingly. So what we've got is all information that used to go to various channels and various services is all channeled through the customer services and their CRM. So whether you're ringing on the telephone, whether you're clicking a dot on a map, that all information all goes to one place. So we start getting a single source of truth, which is important for reporting purposes, which was a challenge in previous years. Depending on what kind of dumping, let's say it was, be it a dirty garden, be it side waste as part of Suez, or be it actual fly tipping in a rural area, the technology looks at that different type and therefore sends that request automatically to the right department. That then generates an email and an update straight back to that goes back to the citizen that made the report. So they get an update saying it's been logged, etc. As that goes through its life cycle in the back office, be it green spaces and street scene, or be it environmental health, as they change the status of what's happened to that piece of work, every status change now gets fired back to the reportee, and that's the same for street lighting as well. So what we're doing there is automatically updating that person that reported it, and therefore that reduces the frustration. The outcome may not be what they want in terms of, let's say it's going to the Northern Power Grid or there's a prosecution ongoing. That information is fed straight back to that person that reported it, so straight back to the customer. So what we're trying to do is get rid of that demand management where we're not updating, and therefore lots and lots of more phone calls. So that was kind of the blueprint, and that was done on fly tipping. That's been applied to street lighting, and we're going to be engaging with customer services and so my team who do the integration pieces with the technology, supporting customer services and the community safety team on environmental blight. So they'll be moving on to noise, dog fouling, antisocial behaviour. And again, that might link in with the police as well. So it's about that loop. So yes, we're using the technology more, and certainly in terms of, I think it's with council tax, they're employing the chatbot technology, the customer services as well, again, to manage that demand. If they can automate that, again, they can perhaps take more calls then from other people that are ringing up that are digitally excluded, etc. So yes, can we use it technology more? Absolutely. Technology is changing all the time. We're trying to design, find out what the problem is and look at what the solution is and then put the technology on top. I think in the past we've probably been guilty of that's a solution and try to make the problem fit the solution. To me, that's not the way to go. It's about identifying what the challenge is, understanding what that process is, re-engineering that, and then moving that forward. And then putting the right technology on, be it AI, be it technology. We're not into AI at the moment, but if we've got solutions, if we've got problems and that's a solution, adult social care, for example, then that's where we need to start looking at that work program and resources and putting a proper project around it. In terms of Office 365, yes, what we did, we rolled that out as part of the pandemic response. So that was really about initially getting people collaborating and communicating from remote locations and being able to work again as teams. We're now looking at more the adoption phase. We've got the technology, it's out there. Some people are running away and trying new things with it, which is great. Some people are slightly more worried about it because perhaps they haven't got the digital skills, so we're putting training packages in place. But in terms of 365, people think of just Teams or Word or Excel. Actually, there's a whole range of applications that we could use to automate. So if you may collect data manually in a spreadsheet and start doing your filtering, etc. Well, actually, Microsoft Forms, for example, if you did a survey, if I sent a survey out to members saying what your pet hates, what are your problems, I could get that information back and it would analyze it for me and it would start telling me those kind of pictures. So it reduces that kind of analysis overhead. It's actually presenting information to you. We can use other applications to trigger automation. So if someone agrees and signs a report, that can automatically fire off to somebody else's. There's a lot we can do with Office 365. What I'm doing is exploring my resources and my teams about how we kind of really move that forward. Because, many ways you can do one process, you could do 10 different ways. So we're learning it as well, and we're trying to explore how we use that to automate more. So I think Office 365, when used to its full advantage, is probably, we can really release some of them admin overheads. And again, we should be using that capacity to, support our most vulnerable. So that's about me, internal, external, is how do we use technology for those that need to use it or want to use it, so we can use that capacity elsewhere for better benefit. So yeah, the opportunities abound with Office 365.
That was a very detailed and enthusiastic response, George. Are you happy with that, or do you feel you need more?
No, thank you, Chair. Do you know what, that incredible response? Thank you, Craig, for that. You really, obviously it's clear that you're passionate about it, and I thank you for taking us through the essentially the back end of things, how things are dealt with on the customer service side. I think moving forward, probably Scrutiny can add a lot of value here as well. Specifically, for example, Craig speaking a lot about the issues and fitting technology within those issues. I think members, and through Scrutiny, could help with that process, really. And in some ways, not obviously you're a tech guy, Craig. We can't design them, but we can certainly help you maybe resolve some of the issues before they come up from our direct experience with residents. So I think possibly moving forward, Scrutiny might have a good review item here, looking at technology and how technology fits within the customer service experience. Thank you, Chair.
Interesting thought, George. Thank you for that. Yeah, Councillor Cook, Jacob, you've got your hand up there.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Yeah, thanks for that answer, Craig, as well. I just wanted to pick up on something, particularly with regard to, you mentioned it could be getting, the customer service element could be also getting integrated with this similar system that's been used for fly tipping. I just wanted to ask, because at the minute, I think if somebody rings up customer services and raises an issue, there's no sort of ticketing system for that, as it were. So there's no way for that particular query to be seen to its resolution. Like, for example, you say with fly tipping it is because you go online, you report that, and then you receive updates on how that's been dealt with. And I just wondered if there's any plans from the council to roll that out just to general inquiries coming into customer services, just so people feel they're being updated, or just so they can see that the query eventually does get resolved. So that was just an interesting point. I wanted to ask Craig if there's any plans for the council to do that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Craig.
No, sorry, go.
No, I should have come in there quickly. I think that's absolutely a really good point to make. And the customer first access point is using the same system that Craig's actually speaking about already. So we're already connecting those systems together. But what we're doing is, in terms of automating that back-to-back process, is starting with the high volume inquiries that are coming into the contact centre first. So we're using that to very much have sort of an intelligence-led approach as to where we need to target our actions. But absolutely, the plan is, as we work through it, to automate as much as possible. I mean, Craig's referenced the chatbots that we've got working already, and they're really good. People don't necessarily know that they're using them all the time. But that's working alongside the work that Craig's team's doing. But to be fair to Craig's team, it is about taking it process at a time. And, you know, to use that old adage, you don't automate a poor process because all you do is kill something quicker. So what we need to do is identify what the problem is that's being created and look at what the different solutions are. When we've established a better process, then we automate it end to end. Fair enough. Yep. Does that answer your question?
Yes, certainly. Thank you. Yes, it's very encouraging. I know it would be a lot bigger project to sort of automate that. So I understand that's going to be something that will be ongoing for some time. But I think it's very positive that steps have been made in that direction. I would welcome that, and thank you for doing that. I just did have one more question, Chair, if that's okay.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a question to Zora, and this may be that you don't deal with this, but is the council's commercialisation strategy part of your responsibility, or is that somebody else?
As you'd expect, probably it sits with Nigel Broadbent
Right.
in terms of our finance, but notwithstanding that, each of our teams actually works with the commercialisation team to put together a business plan, and that can be done whether a service is overtly commercial or not. It's about driving out efficiencies. So, for example, where we've got sports and leisure, where you can see a quite clear customer council transaction, and you can see what the income is, you can look at, you know, an obvious commercialisation stream there. There are other service areas that are not overtly commercialised, but still do that business planning with the commercialisation team to make sure that we're actually getting the most efficient processes applied and the best way of working.
Yeah, that's great. So maybe it's a question then for Nigel Broadbent, who's not, I don't know if he's still in the meeting, but will we as members get a view of these sort of business plans and strategies as they're published? Will they be open to the members of the public or to members in general, or do you know about that, or are they going to be kept completely internal?
I actually don't know the answer to that, Councillor, if I'm being honest. It's Nigel's area. What I would say is that, you know, as and when my services come in front of members, we're completely transparent and have no problem actually sharing that information.
That's great. I think they're going to be very fascinating to read when they actually eventually get written. So I don't know how far along you are in that process, but I'm looking forward to seeing some departments, and it's going to be very interesting. I think it's a great work the commercialisation team's doing, and well, you know, everybody seems to be pulling together to make things more efficient. So yeah, fantastic. Thanks very much.
Good. I don't see any other hands up at the moment. I've got
Councillor Porritt has a question. Sorry, Chair.
Right. Sorry. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, the yellow hand is against a vaguely yellow wall. I couldn't see it with my dimming eyesight. Fire away,
it's
please.
Blended in a bit, hasn't it? I noticed my hand is sort of, I think it's in front of a plant. It's blending in. I just really I wanted to, first of all, thank the officers who brought this report to us. It was a really interesting and concise report, and also I thought a really interesting way of bringing together these different aspects of, it's the same thing, isn't it? We're talking about people and systems, but it all kind of pulling all of those together. And as this is clearly a strategy board that is built for this scrutiny board, I mean, you could have just designed it for us to scrutinise. Really just a request for, I guess, a regular update from this particular strategy board, because obviously this is going to be long-term ongoing work. There's a lot of deadlines in there, some of them going on into 2030. So it's clearly going to be something that there's always going to be something relevant to have a look at. And whether we could, I don't know how frequent would be practical, whether that's something to ask the scrutiny officers, but you know, at least annually, if not 6 monthly, for it to come in and us to have a look at and see how it's all going, and whether these deadlines that have been set internally are continuing to be met, and whether, you know, anything is to be looked at. Thank you.
I think that's a really useful question, Victoria, particularly when you look at the by when dates in relation to the key milestones and so on. Mike, Lauren, is this something we can build into a longer term work programme concept?
There's no reason why not, Councillor Evans, and I mean, probably makes sense from a myself and Lauren to have a chat with officers. There's always a balance of bringing something back every couple of months and there's no particular progress to report, and leaving it so long that you don't actually know what's going on. But I would have thought certainly sometime in the middle of the next municipal year would be my first instinct, but I'd take advice from Zora and her colleagues.
I can see that. Thank you for that suggestion. I've got a couple, one question, I suppose, and one observation. The sort of general question of each of those presenting, what are you most pleased about, happy with in terms of your successes in these areas? And are there areas in each of your specific responsibilities where you're worried or you're not making as much progress as you would have liked? That's a sort of general question, perhaps for each one. And I have an overall one in terms of the key milestones. Some dates have been set on that, and in particular for the activity side, the assets side. A lot of those dates seem to be, in my mind, a long time ahead. I guess there's some good reason for that, but it just worries me that they are so far ahead. Is that not something that we could or should be bringing forward in time? Those are my two comments. So one about what do you think is really working well, what's not working so well, and the timing, particularly in terms of the activity. Don't know who wants to start first.
Can I come in first, Chair? Is that okay? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So fine. I think if I was to actually comment on what's gone well, I think that we as a council have had an absolutely amazing response to actually get the organisation through the pandemic and place it in a strong position as it starts its recovery into the way that we'll work going forwards. And that hasn't happened easily. It's happened because of all of the people that we've got that have been fantastic. The way we've pulled those three strands together, I think it's just been quite incredible. There's still a lot of work to do. And I think we'll always be at the point where we can still make further improvements. But I do think that as a council, we've got a lot to be proud of. And I think that's what I would say is the real positive coming out of this. If I was to actually say what my biggest concern was going forwards, it's actually in terms of ongoing capacity and resilience, because we're set within a context of financial restraints, and yet expectations and demands remain high and are probably going in the opposite direction. So that overall, the old saying, if you want to be doing, ask a busy person. Our staff have worked really hard. They continue to work hard, but as an organisation, a lot of us are tired. So that would be my biggest concern, is that capacity and resilience in the organisation, and where and how do we prioritise those particular investment areas. And then in terms of risk, what is our greatest risk? I think it has to be cybersecurity. And I think that's a risk for every organisation now in the country in terms of the way that we manage our data and deliver our services. And then I'll pass you across for more of a response from each of our leads, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yes, Jackie, I think was the first of the first presentation. Do you have your thoughts on similar way, Jackie?
Very similar to what Zora said. I think we've got to be really, really proud of our staff and the way that they have responded to this, on top of the pandemic response, on top of their day job, kept everything going, balancing it all. We've always had, what I would say, Calderdale staff have always provided goodwill over and above what the normal core hours. Some staff were working, and I'm not particularly proud of this, but some staff were working extremely long hours to respond and keep things going, in the first 12 months of the pandemic. And it's sustaining that, as Zora said. That's my biggest concern and risk, the health and well-being of our staff, and making sure that we give them everything that they need, the resources to prioritise and move things forward. But sustaining this for an indefinite period is my biggest concern that keeps me awake at night, I suppose.
Fair enough. Thank you for that. I think, Alan, you were the third presenter, and particularly my comment about milestones falls under your remit as well. So I don't really want to pick that one up as well at the same time.
Sure. Thanks, Chair. Sorry, I'm going to be quite boring and a broken record. I think the commitment that Zora and Jackie have described of the staff is a big element, but I think the other thing that I wouldn't undersell is the talent and the quality of the people that we've got. every which way I turn, any person that I work with, they're the highest caliber. We've got some fantastic high quality staff who are really talented and knowledgeable and experienced. And it's been interesting, this piece of work, bringing together these three themes. Wherever you look across the organisation, we're interfacing with the whole organisation here, because we were talking about whole organisation change. That's replicated throughout the whole organisation at every level. So that's the thing that inspires me. People inspire me. They're just absolutely inspirational. And again, as has been said, the capacity and the resilience. And another dimension to that, one of the conversations that we're having at the moment is some significant capital implications for the estate itself as part of the transformation. But that conversation's ongoing at the moment, and I'm hoping we're going to get some satisfactory resolution of that in the next month or so. In terms of the milestones, I guess what I would say, and I'll try and say this without appearing defensive, I'm a great believer in not setting ourselves up to fail. We're talking about whole organisational change here. Some of the milestones, if I just pick some examples out, we've got an asset review programme that's due to deliver in March 26. There's a reason for that, because that affects a number of buildings, which is about refurbishment. It's about major investment and remodelling of those buildings to release other buildings. So beneath that overall headline and milestone, there are a series of milestones that sit beneath it in terms of steps along the way. We measure against those, and so you'll see in the highlight report there are, if you like, those steps are set out. So these are intended to be broader, cross-cutting strategic developments that aren't quick fixes in the space of 3 months. There will be 3-month elements that each kind of figure in that, but we're talking about medium-term change here. So the whole organisational transformation doesn't happen overnight. Now, one of the things that I talk to my team about an awful lot is we fall into the bad habit of setting undeliverable milestones, and then all we do is pretend that we're going to achieve something, and then we get upset when we don't. So I'm very keen that what we don't do is set ourselves up to fail. But I'm happy for you to probe further if you'd like to, Chair.
Possibly, but maybe not at this point in time. Thank you for that. Is that it? Yes, it's all the people, isn't it? No, it's Craig. Sorry, Craig. Yes.
No, that's fine. Thanks, Chair. I mean, I was thinking what I was going to say, and it's exactly the same. I was thinking Zora was going to steal my thunder, and then Jackie's mentioned exactly the same, as has Alan.
Have you
and to me, it was around
between you all.
Yeah, so it's a common theme, which, is about the people. So, it's really positive. So in terms of the response to the pandemic, we got Office 365 out there, and the response to technology to help us keep connected, keep the conversations going from colleagues and members. We're in this space now, we're moving into a kind of a hybrid space, and the conversation's ongoing, the appetite's there. So, it's been a really, really positive response, and it's been embraced. So, that was really positive to see. But what we're seeing now is that digital transformation appetite is getting bigger and bigger, and the pace at which it's being requested is higher than ever. So I suppose the concern is being able to have the resource to meet that demand. And that's really against the backdrop of a number of reports we've been seeing over recent months around different authorities that have gone through Section 114 notices or had major governance failings. All the feedback around that is making, mitigation against Section 114 is around the organisation modernising and transforming. So obviously our organisation, I can tell, has an appetite to modernise and transform. And again, through members' comments today, that appetite is there too. So it's the risk to me is having the resource to meet that ever increasing demand against the backdrop of everything that's been going. So it's a positive news story, which is perhaps creating a demand that we may struggle with at some point to keep going, and that'll be a different conversation. But it's certainly positive news overall.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments, questions on this particular item? I just need to say that my charger on my iPad is fighting a slowly losing battle with the charge level on my iPad. So you might be pleased to hear that you might just lose me at some point, and I'll have to ask Bob to take over. Hopefully not. Hopefully not as you. Apart from that, then, if there's no other hands raised, can we thank the people for the report, for Zora and her team for this report, and accept that report. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. And sorry that you've drawn the short straw and been last on tonight in a fairly heavy and lengthy agenda. Can I then move on to the final item on the work programme? And is that something you want to kick off on, Mike or Lauren?
Very, very, very briefly, Chair, because I know members will be anxious to move on into other things this evening. We'll pick up on the discussion about people, asset and systems that came up in that item about bringing a report back sometime in the next municipal year. And the other thing, just to remind members, is that you have the discussion next time of the Cabinet budget proposals, which will be published on the 17th of January from memory. So that's an important discussion. You've touched on issues already this evening, such as the increases in fuel costs, but I'm sure that's something you'll want to do. Just to remind you that on this scrutiny board, you have two roles, and that one is to look at your own areas, but also to pull together a summary report looking at what the other three scrutiny boards come up with. So that's why you meet last on this, and that's an important part of the budget process. And then we report, then myself and Lauren and Fasana pull that together very quickly and put it to Cabinet for the February discussion. That's all I need to, that's all I wish to say on the programme, Chair.
Lauren, you were wanting to mention something? Did I miss that on the chat?
Just briefly, Chair, just to mention that the annual health and safety report that usually comes to this board will be ready in March. So Jackie's agreed to bring that when she comes around HR and OD. So I'll update the work programme and share that with members.
Good. Thank you for that. And thank you, Jackie. So if there's no other business, thank you very much, everybody. Sorry we've run a little bit late. Did forewarn you, but thank you all. See you next time. And if I don't see you, have a good Christmas.
Yeah.
Cheers.